And Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has now halted negotiations with the opposition set to take place later this week in Barbados. This after a ship headed to Venezuela containing some 25,000 tons of soy-made products was seized in the Panama Canal. Government officials are placing the blame on the U.S. after President Trump announced a freeze on all of the Latin American countries' assets earlier this week. So joining us to discuss the ongoing situation in Venezuela is CodePink co-founder Medea Benjamin. Medea, always good to see you. So let's start with this. There's got to be some major implications of this newly announced blockade. I mean, it's a full-on embargo at this point. What can we expect to happen in Venezuela as the U.S. continues to bar the country from receiving goods, making transactions, freezing their assets?
The Trump administration has taken this idea of economic warfare to new extremes. You just had a piece on Iran where the U.S. has been saying to the entire world, you can't trade with Iran. And now it's doing the same thing with Venezuela. It's saying we don't want anybody to trade. And the U.S. is this like the height of imperial hubris to not only say to U.S. businesses what they can and can't do, but to say to the rest of the world. And now having this shipment of soy products, which are to feed the Venezuelan people, being blocked is a terrible, terrible policy that the U.S. has of trying to make things so miserable for the people of Venezuela that they'll overthrow their government.
Right. Isn't this the terrible irony that the U.S. media keeps saying, look, the people are starving, they can't feed their people, but here's a shipment going to feed them, and it can't reach the people.
And it's been blocked. And it's a total lie when they say these new rules leave out humanitarian aid that you can get in food and medicines. They said the same thing about Iran. But guess what? The ships don't want to risk it. The banks don't want to do the transactions. The insurance companies, in fact, with this ship, it was the insurance company that stopped the ship and said, hey, you can't go anymore, because the U.S. is putting pressure on all of these companies. And this is exactly what John Bolton said, which is the truth. Do you want to risk doing any business with the United States so that you can do business with Venezuela, or so you can do business with Iran? Let's face it, compared to the United States, these are small economies.
Right.
And these businesses, countries, they really don't want to take that risk.
Right. They have to operate based on what's good for the business.
Based on the superpower, might makes right. It is totally illegal. It's inhumane. It's wrong. But because the U.S. is so strong and has such power in the international financial market, it thinks it can get away with it.
So the negotiation is supposed to help the opposition and the Maduro government seek some sort of resolution. But even if Maduro didn't call it off, would this meeting in Barbados have really been effective in any way, you think?
The meetings were going well, actually. There had been 5 rounds of meetings mediated by the Norwegian government, and both sides said that the other side was respectful and there was movement forward. So the fact that the U.S. put this in now, and John Bolton himself said the time for talks is over. I mean, the media will blame Maduro for saying he pulled out, but it really was the new economic sanctions and John Bolton, who doesn't want those talks to happen, that made it clear the U.S. is only interested in regime change, will starve the Venezuelan people to get that, and it certainly doesn't care about the well-being of Venezuela.
And opposition leader Juan Guaido, who hasn't really been making his media rounds like we saw a few months ago, he claims that the sanctions will be lifted when Maduro steps down, if and when that ever happens. How likely do you think Maduro, how amenable will he be to do this? And do you buy it? Do you think sanctions will be lifted if Maduro were to step down?
Well, look, this is just hardening everything. Maduro, his government was going along with negotiations and coming up with some ideas, and now that has stopped. And so the position on the Venezuelan side has hardened. The position on the opposition is we're going to go with whatever the U.S. tells us to do, because let's face it, they are U.S. puppets, and the U.S. didn't want these negotiations, so the negotiations are called off now. I hope this is temporary. I hope they go back to the negotiating table, because that's the only way to find a solution. And let's recognize the victims in all of this are the Venezuelan people.
Absolutely. And lastly, the Venezuelan Vice President, Delcy Rodriguez, she's calling on the UN to step in and say something, do something here. But in reality, is the UN really going to be able to make any meaningful change in the U.S. direction?
Well, they can't on the level of the Security Council because the U.S. has the veto power there, but they can bring it up in the General Assembly, and they can push for the Secretary General to speak out about this. And I think it's very important that they go to every international institution they can, because this is illegal, and the world needs to step in and say, let Venezuela deal with its own problems.
All right, we will leave it right there. As always, appreciate your time whenever you're here. Medea Benjamin, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.